suggested murder weapon also tied in with Velva liquids too. Several of the types of hammer thought by Dr. Rana Singh to have been the likely murder weapon were used regularly at the site and were in abundance there, as was the cord and the packaging, material known as gland packing, and the canvas that had been used to package the case. But these items could just have equally come from any of the ships that docked at Velva, and equally, the exact location of the murder could not be ascertained. For although there would have been massive evidence of blood loss from the murder and the dismemberment wherever it had happened, this was almost a decade later where traces of it would be long gone. So police turned their attentions to Eileen's family life and the life she'd led before her disappearance. Eileen was the fifth of 7 children, 6 daughters and a son, that had been born and raised at number 7 Hogarth Road, a house on the Whiteleys estate in South Shields, the other end of the town from Velva Liquids. Home life hadn't been too happy, with Eileen's father William spending long periods away working as a tank cleaner. When he was home, he was a heavy drinking, heavy-fisted, argumentative man, and as Eileen's siblings grew, each of them took the first opportunity that they could to leave home and start afresh. With such a turbulent home life, it inevitably began to affect Eileen, leading to her rebelling somewhat and becoming a bit of a tearaway. At first it was being placed on report in the school, Bringburn Comprehensive, for several different incidents, which graduated to a number of suspensions and eventual expulsion aged 14. During this period, she also ran away from home on a number of occasions, being reported as missing to police at least 4 times. And by 1969, the year before she went missing, Eileen also had a criminal record, having been convicted of the theft of a handbag and placed on probation. She spent as little time at home as she possibly could, being a regular visitor to her sister Elizabeth's flat in Urfa Terrace in the Law Top area of South Shields, which Elizabeth shared with 2 other girls, Mary Bell and Anne Sutherland, and from where Eileen began to make herself a new circle of friends. An attractive girl, she had a ready string of admirers and found herself popular, shall we say, with boys that she met, having a string of casual boyfriends at just 16 years old. Eileen would also go missing for days on end, and during these times, it was not always established where she'd been staying. A focus upon the crucial period before her disappearance revealed that Eileen's whereabouts for a couple of weeks in early December 1969 were unknown, but that around the Christmas period, she had travelled down to the Maidstone area of Kent to spend Christmas of that year with her brother Billy, who was a serving soldier in the Royal Engineers, and his wife Marie. Marie liked her younger sister-in-law and enjoyed having her to stay, even giving Eileen some of her clothes to keep. And it seems that Eileen's stay in Maidstone was initially considered to have been more of a permanent one. She'd stayed there over the Christmas and New Year period, and according to her brother, had even found herself a job in a Maidstone brewery at the very start of 1970. But almost as soon as she'd started here, Eileen began staying out until midnight almost each evening, and then without warning, after only a few days in this role, gave the job up. After some suggestion from Billy that she should perhaps return to the South Shields area, which Eileen reportedly accepted quite happily, he took her back up to South Shields on the train on Friday the 16th of January 1970, which corresponded with him having a period of weekend leave that he planned to spend back in the northeast catching up with old friends. Upon arrival back here, Eileen, complete with 2 plastic carrier bags filled with her clothes, left Billy outside a favoured pub of his, the Ship and Royal, in the town centre, and headed off. Now, wherever she was heading, she hadn't disclosed to Billy on the journey up, but wherever it was close by. For just 30 minutes later, Eileen was seen by someone who knew her in a different pub, the Douglas Vaults, in a different outfit, and without her bags of clothes. There can be no mistake that it was a different dress to what she was wearing when she travelled up, as the new dress was a startling number that was see-through and made of lace, revealing Eileen's underwear quite openly. Eileen's sister Elizabeth remembered seeing her dressed like this in a pub on the Friday evening, and then subsequently in a South Shields nightclub called Latinos the same night. Now, Eileen left the club with a boyfriend of hers and went back to his house until about 2 a.m. on the Saturday, but she didn't spend the night there, and it is unknown where she stayed after she left his. Later that Saturday afternoon, Eileen's mother Agnes ran into her in the former Woolworths department store in the centre of South Shields, although she hadn't returned to the family home by that point, and her movements following this could not be ascertained until the last place she had been seen alive, H.S. Edwards Street, at the home of another boyfriend of hers, a man named Graham Aitken. Eileen had arrived at Graham's door at about 2:30 that Sunday morning, soaked to the skin and having changed her clothes once again somewhere, this time wearing just a t-shirt and jeans. She told him that she'd been, I quote, thrown out, although she didn't say where from, and Graham had taken the girl in and they went to bed together. However, at 7 a.m. that Sunday morning, Graham's father had discovered the pair in bed together, and following the almighty row as a result of this, Eileen had gathered up her still wet clothing and fled from the house. This was the last time Eileen had been seen alive by anyone who knew her, apart from her killer, and the last time she was seen before her pathetic remains were discovered in tank number 1 of Velva Liquids 9.5 years later. But less than a month after Eileen's remains had been discovered and her decade-old movements had been painstakingly established, police believed that they had her killer. It was somewhat of a jump to believe this, as I'm sure that you'll see. But Eileen's sister Elizabeth, who looked very similar to the murdered girl and was only a year older than her, had moved into the flat in Urfa Terrace in 1969 that she'd shared with Anne Sutherland and Mary Bell. I must stress, by the way, not the infamous Northeast child killer Mary Bell, someone totally different. The three girls had found themselves a babysitting job in South Shields for 3 young children in a house on nearby Anderson Street, quite near to the town centre. They had been hired by the children's father, a man named Ernest Adolphus Clark, who had separated from the mother who had sole custody of them, to care for them while he worked rolling shifts as a plant engineer half a mile away on Velva Liquids. It later transpired that Eileen would often accompany her sister and Cole when they were looking after the Clark children.
Got your dinner?
Putting 2 and 2 together,
Okay.
coming up with here we are, here was a definitive link, however tenuous, between Velva Liquids and Eileen McDougal. In fact, what police came up with was, "We've got our man," which was a direct quote from an account of a police investigation that was later written by one of the police officers who'd been assigned to investigate the case. But Ernest Adolphus Clark, or Ernie as he was more commonly known, didn't jump off the page as a hard-wielding maniac and butcher of a young girl, Eileen's likely killer. A West Indian of origin, born in the island country of St. Kitts and Nevis in 1930, Clark had come to the UK in 1963, where he found work on a South Shields oil installation working as a pipe fitter for a firm called Tubecraft Limited. Tubecraft was taken over by Velva Liquids in 1966. The hard-working Clark, always regarded as an impressive worker by his bosses during his time working at Tubecraft, was also offered a job by the manager of the incoming Velva Liquids, the fabulously named Douglas Moon, which he accepted. By that time, Clark had met his wife, a South Shields girl named Jenny Duncan, and the couple had a young family with 2 children, 2 girls and a boy. So the offer of a decently paid role at a place he was already familiar with appealed to Clark greatly, and from 1966 to the 27th of January 1970, he worked at the Velva site just off River Drive, so he could be placed as working there when Eileen McDougal had last been seen. Police jumped upon the fact that Clark had left employment at Velva so soon after this, less than 2 weeks, as meaning only one thing. His guilt had forced him to quit, and he wanted to put as much distance between himself and Velva as he could. Now here, there are conflicting reports as to why Clark left Velva that I discovered whilst I was researching the episode. Accounts exist that say Clark left of his own accord in protest of being passed over for promotion to site foreman over the brought with a pay increase. The most common reports are that a workmate of Clark's, a man named Ronnie Embleton, who'll come into the tale a bit later on, was already lined up for this promotion. But Clark felt so strongly that Embleton was unsuited for the role and that it should instead go to another worker, a man named Brian Fender, but he wrote to his manager, Douglas Moon, suggesting this. Now apparently this didn't go down very well at all and was classed almost as insubordination, leading to Douglas Moon terminating Clark's employment and questioning his judgment. Go, Rick, go, you dictator. By this time also, Clark and his wife Jenny had divorced, with neighbours telling of months of furious rows that they would hear coming from the couple's then home in Headley Street. She'd left and Clark had retained sole custody of the children. Following his release from Velva, Clark remained in the South Shields area for the next 9 months, working for a period at Tyne Dock Engineering, and towards the end of 1970, he and his children had moved down to the city of Hull for a fresh start, but he eventually bought a mid-terraced house on Hull's Kingsbench Street, number 51, and found himself a job as a process worker in a fish meal factory, a job which he held until being made redundant in March 1979. He'd married once again in 1971 to a woman named Linda Scott, although this marriage was to break down after 4 years of culminating divorce in 1976. But he remained in Hull, where he was well liked and regarded by workmates and neighbours, and remembered as being a devoted father and a smart dresser and good-looking man who enjoyed the company of women and the occasional flutter on the horses. Clark and his children were still living somewhat contentedly in Kingsbench Street when police came knocking on his door on the afternoon of Thursday the 12th of July, 1979, in connection with the murder of Eileen McDougal.
Let's get back to the way we were, the fun, to the cinema, to gigs in galleries, the gym, the thrill of stadium, to being with each other, to the things we love.
Testing is free, quick and vital to stop the spread of coronavirus. So let's get tested and get back to the things we love. If you're feeling unwell, get a free test now. Call 119 or go to nhs.uk.
When police questioned Clark, he willingly admitted having formerly worked at Valva Liquids, and that he tenuously known Eileen McDougal, as her elder sister Elizabeth had used to babysit him, and Eileen would occasionally come with Elizabeth and her flatmates to look after the children. But then the questioning reportedly took a bit more of an accusatory tone. Clark was asked about his sexual preferences, to which he again reportedly made no bones about saying that his preference was for young white women between the ages of 16 and 21, and further that he'd had sexual relations with both Elizabeth McDougal and Anne Sutherland, I quote, many times, perhaps being genuine, perhaps showing off someone, but he denied ever having sex with Eileen. Clark was taken back to South Shields Police Headquarters, where police further looked into his past. They found a history that I previously described from him coming to the UK, but there was no evidence of Clark ever having a history of violence. Indeed, the only time he'd ever been in trouble with the police was in the late 1960s, when he'd been charged with the theft of a post office bankbook and had been fined £50 as a result. This was it. Apart from this blog,